Today we're helping Miles take on Charlie Kirk's arguments and stand up with real facts. Charlie's good at spinning weak points to sound convincing, but we're about to break those down and give Miles the tools to hit back hard. Let's get to it.
So in the spirit of hearing ideas that we might always hear, tell us why you're supporting Kamala Harris.
I just like her character more than I like Trump. I don't like it. No.
Guys, give Miles an opportunity to uninterrupted to tell me, because it's fascinating. I didn't know her character was something worth.
I like that she's trying to work for the middle class. That's what I see a lot, and I think that's what she is.
So yeah, Miles. So I have a question. Mm-hmm. What has she or Joe Biden done for the middle class in the last 4 years?
First off, Kamala Harris isn't the president, she's the vice president, and her powers are limited. But if you're talking about what the administration has done, let's talk specifics. Biden's team passed the Inflation Reduction Act to help middle-class families with medical costs and prescription prices, capping insulin costs, and funding major infrastructure projects to boost middle-class jobs. Compare that to Trump's tax cuts, which mostly favored the top 1%. So if we're looking at what's actually been done for the middle class, this administration's at least walking the talk.
You go that way? No. Not too sure about that.
That's okay. So,
but I'm slowly getting there.
No, that's okay.
Election day, I feel like that's okay. We can work our way up.
For sure, no, and it takes a lot of courage to come up to an event like this. Mm-hmm. So let me tell you where we're coming from, and then maybe I can convince you to trade out that hat for a MAGA hat. Just maybe, okay? That's a long shot. We'll see. So Kamala Harris is part of a tradition of career politicians that run very persuasive, sexy political advertisements that are nowhere in alignment with what they've actually done. Mm-hmm. So let's look at the issues we care about most. I imagine, Miles, you want to be able to own a home.
Yeah,
at some time.
That's my main goal. I want to own
awesome.
a home.
And good. Honestly, Miles, everybody in this audience should be able to own a home as easily as your parents were. But right now, especially here in Phoenix, it's so out of grasp. When Trump was president, the average mortgage rate in Phoenix, Arizona, mortgage payment was $700 a month. Now it's $2,000 a month here in the city of Phoenix. Said differently, it required $75,000 a year to buy a home in Phoenix when Trump was president. Now it's $135,000 a year to buy a home.
Here's the deal, Charlie. Phoenix's housing costs have been shooting up for years. During Trump's term, ultra-low mortgage rates, population growth, and limited housing pushed prices higher. Sure, mortgage rates rose under Biden to control inflation, but Phoenix's skyrocketing home prices are more about demand and supply issues that go back well before him. Blaming Biden alone ignores that these problems started long before and are driven by way more than who's in the White House.
Year to buy a home. You might say, well, Charlie, how is that Biden and Kamala Harris's fault? They decided to spend $6 to $7 trillion of unnecessary government spending right out of the gate that increased asset prices. Additionally,
please, asset prices like home values have been soaring due to years of supply shortages, increasing demand, and disrupted supply chains worsened by the pandemic. While Biden's administration approved COVID relief spending, so did Trump with almost $3 trillion during his term. This massive bipartisan spending across two administrations was aimed at preventing a deep recession, not raising asset prices. Trump's policies fueled low interest rates, sparking a housing demand surge, which has a much greater impact on asset inflation than Biden's stimulus alone. So if we're blaming any president for asset increases, it's not just Biden in the spotlight.
Prices. Additionally, they allowed 10 million people into the country that we didn't account for. That also increases the demand for housing, especially here in this state. So
if rising housing prices were really driven just by immigration, then we'd expect other high immigration periods in U.S. history to show similar skyrocketing prices, which simply isn't the case. Housing costs are far more affected by zoning issues, supply shortages, and demand from a strong market. Phoenix, for example, has seen population growth from both in and out-of-state migration for years, not just from immigration. Also, the numbers on immigration don't line up. 10 million people is misleading. Actual numbers show far fewer admitted under Biden than Kirk's exaggerated claim, with much of that being refugees or people on temporary protective status. In reality, the housing crisis isn't fixed by pointing fingers at immigration. It's about building affordable homes and fixing supply issues.
So we really care about the ability for you to be able to own the home. And if Kamala Harris is going to do it, she would have done it these last 4 years. Secondly, we care about ending the wars. I bet you're pretty interested in that. War is not... no, maybe?
No, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Let's end the wars.
Yeah, so Kamala Harris has demonstrated and surrounded herself with people that are aggressively in favor of the Russian-Ukrainian war, and the same people that designed the failed wars of Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and Libya. For example, Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, Leon Panetta, John Bolton. Donald Trump is the only president of an unbroken chain of 32 years to start no new wars. and actually bring peace to the Middle East. We did not have any new wars under Donald Trump.
Let's get real here. Kamala Harris isn't the sole villain in the Ukraine situation. That's just a lazy scapegoat. Foreign policy is a tangled web involving countless players, not just one person or party. Now, claiming Trump is the only president in 32 years who didn't start a new war, that's an egregious oversimplification. Sure, he didn't kick off a new ground war, but he escalated military actions like launching airstrikes in Syria. And let's not forget the assassination of Iranian General Soleimani, which raised tensions significantly and put us on the brink of conflict. The so-called peace Trump likes to brag about in the Middle East, that didn't just magically appear under his watch. It relies on military support and long-standing alliances that predate his presidency. So while he can strut around saying he didn't start new wars, let's not pretend his presidency was a peaceful oasis. His actions had consequences, and it's time to stop glossing over that reality.
New wars under Donald Trump. And finally, I mentioned this briefly, the border. I believe that everyone in this audience should be given preference above somebody who illegally comes into our country that was not welcome or invited. When Trump was president, we had the most secure border in history. Under Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, we've had 10 million people, and they get taxpayer-funded benefits. They get luxury hotel rooms. They get flights into the interior of the country. And so on those...
Let's break down this nonsense. First off, the idea that everyone in this audience should be prioritized over undocumented immigrants is a blatant attempt to stoke fear and division. It's not about deserving more. It's about human rights and recognizing that people seek refuge for various reasons, many of which are dire. Now, saying we had the most secure border under Trump, that's a stretch. Yes, there were fewer illegal crossings at certain points, but it was also during a pandemic when the restrictions were in place. The reality is, border security is a complex issue influenced by various factors, including international policies and social conditions in neighboring countries. As for the claim that immigrants get taxpayer-funded benefits, that's an oversimplification. Many undocumented immigrants pay taxes, including sales taxes and income taxes, via payroll deductions, but don't receive benefits like Social Security or Medicare. So instead of fear-mongering, let's have a serious discussion about comprehensive immigration reform that respects human dignity and national security.
The country. And so on those three issues, home ownership, the border, and war, Donald Trump doesn't just say he did. And I would just ask you, you don't have to answer right now, because I know it's hard to get in front of an audience of people like this. Can you show me that anything Kamala has done that shows she's better at Trump than what Trump did on those three things?
No.
First off, let's get one thing straight. Kamala Harris is the vice president, not the president. She follows Biden's lead, so blaming her for policies and actions is like blaming the assistant coach for the team's losses. Trump had the power to make decisions directly, while Kamala's influence is limited by the presidency. We do know what Trump did during his time in office, and it's pretty clear that he made some significant moves. For instance, he pushed through major tax cuts with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, which primarily benefited corporations and the wealthy, while leaving many middle-class Americans feeling shortchanged. During Trump's administration, the average monthly mortgage payment in Phoenix was not as low as $700 as Charlie claims. Instead, it was closer to around $1,500 by the end of his term in January 2021. In contrast, as of early 2024, the average monthly payment has risen significantly, with some estimates indicating it can exceed $2,500. While there has been an increase in mortgage payments, the claim that it jumped from $700 to over $2,000 under Biden is just a flat-out lie. On the international stage, Trump's erratic approach alienated allies and emboldened adversaries, leading to strained relationships with countries like Canada and Germany. Plus, his administration's handling of the pandemic was widely criticized for a lack of preparedness.
Three things.
No.
That's okay. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I want to encourage you to do your research because it is it's very tempting to fall for propaganda that you just see on TV. I bet a lot of people here in the audience can give you something to think about and something to consider because Kamala Harris, she does not care for you. She cares about her own political career. Trump is different. Last thing I'll say is this. The guy's been shot multiple times, facing 700 years in prison. They took all of his money from him, his business empire, and he keeps on fighting. There's something about him where he cares deeply about the well-being of your life and your livelihood to put our country first. So, Rob, do you want to...
Charlie, be honest. Trump's legal issues aren't about fighting for regular Americans. They're about him facing consequences for his own choices. The 700 years he's potentially facing comes from criminal charges, not from him being a hero for the middle class. And as for putting America first, look at the tax cuts he pushed through that overwhelmingly benefited corporations and the wealthy, leaving the middle class behind. His policies didn't exactly protect people's livelihoods. They catered to the elite. So let's not confuse self-preservation with genuine public service.
First. So, Rob, do you want to add something to that?
I just want to say something that's really important. What's happened under this administration, the Biden-Harris administration, and this affects all of you. They've secretly, not so secretly, put in the selective service back in, and I do not want any of you fighting on foreign soil, any of you fighting on any wars. Any of you. I don't want it. And as far as democracy, they say they're saving democracy. Well, let me just go over this. Because Bernie Sanders technically had won in 2016, the Democratic nomination for president. But they didn't give it to him. They used these super delegates to dump him and put in who they wanted undemocratically in the primary in 2016. In 2020, again, Biden lost the first two primaries, and they just made everybody else drop out. And so you had no choice. If you were a Democratic voter in 2020, you had to vote for Biden. The same thing again this year. 14 million people voted for Biden in the Democratic primary, and none of those votes count because they just decided to take him out because they thought they could lose, and they just anointed Kamala Harris with 0 votes. That is not democracy. That is tyranny, and it gives you a little taste of what they intend to do if they remain in power. So
Hold on, that sounds like a conspiracy theory more than reality. You're claiming democracy doesn't work because of one party's internal processes, while ignoring that both parties have influence tactics in primaries. The assertion that Kamala Harris was anointed ignores a broader electoral system and national party strategy. If anything, the real challenge is how the electoral system prioritizes the powerful, something Trump benefited from too. Let's not pretend only one side plays politics.
Power. So I wish you the best. Think about this, and I'm going to give you a hat just in case you want to wear it.
And Miles, let me just ask, what we talked about, those 3 things, did you hear that previously before in a fair setting?
No, I did not hear it in fair setting as before, but it's good to be on one-on-one and just like have a conversation about that.
Cool. Well, Miles, I want to thank you for coming up. Please.
That's a wrap on dissecting Charlie Kirk's arguments. We challenged claims, cut through the noise, and brought some real context to the debate. Stay sharp, stay informed, and don't fall for the easy rhetoric. Until next time, question everything.